I'm also from the like a pharma background. And so as anyone working in healthcare and so the past year and a half and or maybe more, past almost 2 years. And so COVID-19 is a big topic. And so there's no escaping. We're still living, working under the shadow of COVID-19. So we have two investors and one entrepreneurs on our panel. And so can you share your experience and what impact of COVID-19 had and on your business, and also what do you see in the any future trends and post the pandemic? And I think we'll start with Sina.
Yes, I can actually share experience not as a CEO of a company, but also as a clinician. Both impact. As a CEO of a company, the business has been slow. Our product has been monitoring some activity in hospitals, clinical study. This is what we do, and some study actually stopped completely, and we do that around the world, and you can actually start somewhere and stop. And we saw that actually last year that we have to stop some of our activity because the patients were not coming or they were not allowed to come to hospital. Now things are, again, they change, and remote technology, because again we do that remotely, is starting. But we were actually also hit by the fact that our patients were not able to come to the hospital and do their exam at least, or get the advice from the center, each clinical study center. But that was on, I would say, as a business owner or as a business manager. And of course, we developed a device. Remote working is amazing, okay, but when you develop a device that can be used by an 85-year-old patient in Albania or India or China, we do need to sit down around one table, try physically the device and see how it works. I'm again big fan, as you can see. I've been in my office, thanks to ZGC and their entire support for this time, which was very hard for all startups. I was able to get some of my team member to come and be staying away, but that was a challenge for us, because we do have a small part of our business is a device, and that was also affected by the fact that people were not able to come. Now, as a clinician, actually, ophthalmology may be one of the only, I would say, area that remote or telemedicine would not work very well. When you go to an ophthalmology or an exam, you spend 90% of the time in front of expensive device, material, OCT, scan, and all of that. But you can't do that. You cannot just look at a patient and tell them your eye pressure is high or low. And just a very important example is measuring eye pressure. You need a very special device, this air puff or the other way. And that's why, unfortunately, the ophthalmology was almost the #1 in low. People were not able to go to their patient, to the doctor, and the doctor were not able to really have a telemedicine. Even they can talk, but it's not enough. And I think that's one of the area, which is ophthalmology, that we need really investment in at-home remote monitoring, especially the eye pressure, which is one of the most important tests, I would say, to have.
Okay. Thank you, Sina. And Bill, and is there any impact on your investment and as well as your portfolio companies?
No particularly.
Good to know. Good to know.
Oh my God! I know. I mean, it was. It was. We've gone through very interesting sort of waves and cycles and experiences with this in terms of initially when it hit and we did the lockdown. We assumed that it was going to be a version of the 2008 meltdown. So the sort of the thinking generally was that it's obviously different than a Wall Street crash, but that it would have that same effect because you were going to have this massive macroeconomic impact.
Mm-hmm.
And initially the market fell off a cliff, and we're all sent home to work at home, and so there was this initial reaction that it was going to be like the meltdown, And then, what we discovered was, hey, working with Zoom and other tools wasn't that bad, wasn't that hard. And in fact, all of a sudden, we discovered that as investors, we could be pretty dramatically more productive working from home through Zoom. So, generally we would go travel to a site or, even fly to an entrepreneur site to do the on-site visit. And all that was off. And we thought, oh dear, we'll never be able to close a deal because we can't visit the entrepreneur. Well, what we discovered was, we could get by with these remote conversations. We could have more of them. And finally, it was in July. It was in July, we did our first investment of a company that we had never met in person. So, we continued investing in the early part of COVID, but all of those companies were companies we had met before COVID, right? Yeah. And then all of a sudden, we're talking to companies we had never met in real life. We actually invested in a company in India. And probably if it weren't for COVID, we would not have invested in this company. But what happened was we got so comfortable with the Zoom experience that all of a sudden we said, who needs to visit the company? And so the effect of that was to flatten the world in terms of venture capital investing. And all of a sudden, you could be talking to someone in Israel or someone in Singapore or someone in Finland and or someone in San Francisco. And it really wasn't much different, where they were in the world. And so I think part of this impact in the venture capital world was that it made the world flatter for entrepreneurs, which sort of meant, right, that entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley were competing against entrepreneurs everywhere else on the planet. So good news, bad news. And from our point of view, in terms of our portfolio companies, so this was very, very segment specific. And so we thought it was going to be a meltdown, but it wasn't. It was this sort of skewed impact. There were a few, surprisingly few businesses that were whacked. We had not done a lot in hospitality or transportation or, some of those things. We thought, we thought that logistics would get whacked. And actually it turned out to be a tailwind in logistics, right? Okay. Because all of a sudden, everybody was buying more stuff than they needed because they thought the world was coming to an end, right? So we were shipping in toilet paper from Mexico and Canada, right? Remember? I don't know. It was crazy. So there was this massive shift of products from warehouses into cupboards and closets and garages because of COVID. So there were all these dynamics that happened in these, sort of different sectors, depending upon where you were. And meanwhile, the whole digital economy was, either untouched or enhanced. And we saw that. And then you add on top of it all of the stimulus money. And, interestingly, savings around the planet, savings went up because, the poor people, I hate to put it this way, but low income, they didn't have any money anyway. And affluent people couldn't spend money. And so what you had was this unbelievable expansion of savings around the planet, which created this flood of, which is part of this flood of money that now has, pushed the markets, the public markets and the private markets, way up. So that's very interesting. So do you think those hospitality or those industry took a big hit? Do you think they can bounce back after the pandemic or? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and we're already seeing it, that's, you know, again, because there's so many people around the planet that are so desperate to travel. You're actually now seeing some sectors that this summer, early in this summer, there were some aspects of travel and domestic travel, you know, primarily, and hospitality and restaurants, that actually passed their pre-COVID numbers.
Okay.
Because of all this pent-up demand. So yeah, I mean, so, and then we already talked about the impact on healthcare in terms of, you know, the added incentive to be investing in healthcare because of the awareness created by COVID.
Yeah. All right. So Ella.
Actually, Alice, I do have also follow-up question for Bill. I like to ask this question all the time when I, for instance, moderate some panel regarding really about the future investment pattern. Actually, I totally agree with you, Bill. So the pandemic actually made, especially also a lot of very conservative investors realize actually this virtual meeting is also something that they can accept and also create a better opportunity to find a deal from other part of the world, and also let a startup also find a better way to raise funding. But when I tried it also, some investors seems they still prefer when, of course, the condition permits, they still prefer to have face-to-face interaction. And they claim, for instance, a lot of detail, for instance, about the team, especially if you invest in the early stage company, team is very important.
Yeah,
without really the personal interaction, you're missing also a lot of things. So they refuse to put down the money before really seeing the person. So how do you see, do you really think even after, for instance, pandemic, after like 3 years after, will that really still be like many investors may change their mind? I'm just curious. Myself really prefer just a virtual, but I do also hear different advice from other investors. I'm curious.
No, I mean, you know, and obviously we've thought about this a lot in terms of what's going on, you know, with us in this process. And of course, you know, sort of intuitively, you know, personal connection, face-to-face would be better. But practically speaking, so here's the dynamic that changed that we realized it was really significant. The dynamic that changed was you would meet an entrepreneur, you know, maybe you'd meet an entrepreneur at an event, right? So you know, someone would come up to you, you bump into somebody and they'd say, hey, you know, I've got this great new technology that's going to cure cancer. And we go, wow, that's cool. Can you come to our office and pitch us, right? And so they would come to the office and pitch us. And, you know, the experience of the 1 hour meeting in a venture capital office is a very artificial experience. Fair, right? It's a very artificial experience. And so we would get something from it, you know, and maybe every once in a while maybe we'd go out to lunch, but nah, not so much, right? So we'd have this 1 hour experience with the entrepreneurs, and then we would have a whole bunch of conference calls after that. So we did not use video conferencing, right? We just used conference calls. And so now I get 5 times as much FaceTime with an entrepreneur as I ever got before COVID. And the way, you know, and it's a little bit weird at the beginning, but I think we got more authentic face-to-face exposure to entrepreneurs than we did before COVID. Because most of our communication before COVID was not visual. And, you know, we would have the visual, oh yeah, we've met and we know the person, we think that's enough. And we're listening to over the phone and then we're reading over the emails, but you're not seeing them eye to eye. Even though this doesn't feel exactly like eye to eye, you get much more personality on Zoom than you do on a conference call.
Okay.
So I think that I think that is, and I swear I am not going to take another conference call with an entrepreneur. I'm going to insist on Zoom, right? I mean, because conference calls are so dead, right? So the irony of all this, I think, is that conference calls are dead, and not that anybody made money from conference calls anyway. And
a quick question to Bill and Ella, because of the availability of conference calls and you can schedule more meetings. As a result, do you look at more deals or same amount of deals as before?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly we are looking at more deals.
Okay. Well, what about you, Ella?
It's definitely the same way. Actually, I'm the type of investor before I don't feel comfortable to do this virtual call before the pandemic. I always insisted I'd rather just travel. I don't mind travel. I don't mind to drive for 1 hour or something and then to meet some important company or personnel. And I really changed. I'm the one of the very typical person changed during pandemic, and I find out that this virtual thing become really convenient. I totally agree with Bill. A lot of character and also details and the feature you can catch by virtual conference call. Of course, it's not really the virtual conference call. So this is give you also great access opportunity to persons in the other part of the country, in the other part of the world. So we do really actually receive more application than before. Also part of the reason because pandemic also promoted also have a lot of a company they switch from for instance travel or some industry that hugely impacted by pandemic, and in order to survive they switch their business model. We also see a lot of companies like new healthcare companies are like this. So those number are increased significantly, but also meanwhile is also that way. Also this year, since we're also building this new healthcare accelerator, this is also the part I found is very helpful. Actually, if you look at our current accelerator mentors, actually, I would say 80% of them, maybe not that large, like a majority of the mentors are not really from local, from all over the country. And they do not, like before we started this virtual accelerator, I remember I had the conversation with our partner, and I told them, I do not really want to run accelerator online. And I really prefer the startup just to come to the site and have a really better interaction. And now I really changed my mind. The workshop, the mentor, one-on-one mentorship, the meetings is become really convenient. So this is like what I totally agree. The investment pattern is really something gonna last also after pandemic. Besides of that, I want to say also collaboration is also one part that you see the changes, right? So the collaboration change not only reflected on the more collaboration, the collaboration from different geography, for instance, like a clinical trial between different, and not only between hospitals, among hospitals in different locations, sometimes in different countries, but also we're talking about, for instance, more collaboration in different area, for instance, between the research, like a R&D scientist versus the data processor or image analyzer. This is also the trend. And also, if you look at really where the money, the disease, the funding, and also government funding, and also the investment funding, where it goes. If you're looking at the last year, actually, of course, majority of them, big portion of them goes to oncology, but also there's like an increased portion, as you can imagine, goes to infectious disease. And last year, there were increased almost 1/4 of the new government funding went to the vaccine development. And this is also something happen. And we are really happy also to see actually not only the financing of healthcare reach a new record high, but also there are really the emergence of new technology or also method now being emphasized and also targeted more because of the time.
Yes. Yeah. Well, as I think talk about technology, I think all three of our speakers and cover a little bit in their presentation. Healthcare is like a pretty conservative and highly regulated field. And I think all three mentioned like the adoption of technology in healthcare has been slow, right? And so is there anything like you think either the government, like a regulatory body, or communities like IEEE can do to accelerate this kind of process?
Sina, you wanna take that one?
Again, I think I just wanna, I put my hat as a clinician or doctor. As Bill said in his presentation, there have been lots of hype, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, even in my field of glaucoma, when you really look, and despite the fact that big pharma announced new drug coming, but it's the same way. What I mean by that is we still have people who don't have money to buy expensive, medication in U.S. People go blind, even they take their medication. I think there is lots of things that we can improve, but how can we accelerate that? I think there is the inequality, it's a really big problem. And in my view, it's not easy to address, but we can address by, in Silicon Valley. Unfortunately, I'm going to answer you by a question to Bill. My experience as an entrepreneur raising money for a solution that they can accelerate this adoption has been, I would say the second question a venture capital asked me, what is the business model? What is the revenue projection? Which is important question, of course, but I can tell you in all these years of experience that if you tell them we can save people's sight, our product, it's $1 product, they can be adopted very fast, but the revenue going to be $15 or $10 million company, I can tell you at least 80% of venture capitalists in Silicon Valley are not going to invest because they said, hey, are you going to be a unicorn or that? And I have seen that on and on. Unfortunately, we have more unicorn these days in health tech than product that can really be adopted very soon by the patient. I don't want to name the company, but there is a company who went public recently, $2 billion valuation, $1.5 million in the revenue. That means the adoption of number of patients using that is very small. And honestly, I don't know. What I'm trying to say is, I think there is a collaboration. We have to be little less thinking about you becoming a unicorn. I would love to become a unicorn again, but that's not, take me long. But I really think that just looking at service that can be adopted, elderly, for example, products are so complicated for them, but they still, they can't put a drop in their eye after all of that. It's possible. Simplifying, I think the government, again, I'm coming from France, when the healthcare system is not like here. If you have a product that they can really help, it's going to be reimbursed, it's going to be free for the patient, it's going to be pushed to the market. Here you have other hurdles. I think insurance would love to have product to reduce, again, the cost, is the adoption by also the physician. It's not only adoption by the patient. Our product has, we have done study, 99% adoption rate by elderly people because it's very easy to use. But then you have the physician, then you have insurance. It's lots of work to do. We're trying hard. But I think investor can play a big role on also investing in some startup who may not be a unicorn, but they can actually bring some value to the health.
So that was you throwing down the gauntlet to me and Pegasus to fund Kali, right?
Yeah.
I get that. So right, and I mean, I don't want to apologize for the venture capital community, but there's a reason that people invest money in us in order for us to invest that money in others, and so we have this opportunity space that we have to attack to try to find the best possible investments for our investors. And that's, that happens to be our business. If I were an angel investor, I would have much more flexibility to invest sort of, altruistically, for social impact, for philanthropic, et cetera, et cetera. And so there are a lot of angel investors and there are a lot of funds that have that double bottom line or social impact kind of, charter, which is, a specific kind of fund. So not every opportunity is of equal, is a fit for every venture fund. And so our reality as a $1.5 billion venture fund is, we've got to find companies that are going to make, that are going to generate the kind of return on investment that makes a dent in our, in our fund. So that's, that's just the reality of the business that we are in. But to the core question about accelerating improvements in healthcare, my big rant is it's not about money and it's not about technology. So I got this shocked response when I was asked on another panel, is there enough money and being invested in these new technologies to accelerate their adoption and success? Well, there's plenty of money. It's not a money thing, and it's not, it's not a technology thing. If we want to improve healthcare in the United States and around the world, it's not about technology. It's about public health and human behavior, right? I mean, people don't, it's bad food, bad habits, it's all of our, the biggest impact we can make in healthcare in the United States is in addressing human behavior and not prescribing more drugs.
Okay. Thank you.
Right?
And Ella, and so can you have a conclusion statement and for our session in 1 minute?
Conclusion. Okay, I was about to say something else that I really want to comment.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
For the 1 minute.
Yeah, go anything. Yeah.
But I do remember during my PhD, one of the course is really talking about the ethical issue, doing some genetic profiling back then, and we were focusing. My research was in diabetes, and we were talking about the genetic testing on the baby who are believed to may have a family history of type 1 diabetes, and we had this whole semester of this ethical discussion. And I think that is something, especially like the previous part I was talking about the next 5 future trends of healthcare. One trend is about the greater adoption of application of precision medicine. So precision medicine is really helping giving a better solution to physicians to provide a better treatment and also diagnosis method. However, it also have its own issue. For instance, for those who are discovered, for instance, after the genetic testing, who are discovered to be at a high risk of certain disease, usually in the current environment would find them vulnerable to discrimination. For instance, when such results were given to employer, and the employer could use that as a way to hire those who are so-called healthier talents. And also insurance company could also take advantage of such information, for instance, to reject applicants based on their not so good genetic profile. So right now there are also, it's been really decades discussion about what really are the limit, what are really the boundary about how much information should be given to insurance company or the employer of this personnel genetic detection results in order to stop the genetic discrimination. And this is something definitely we need this is something the regulator definitely can really play a role play a role here. So this is like a one part that I want to also add.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Ella. And also, I think the time is up, and I really appreciate everyone come to our session. And also a big thank you to 3 of our speakers, and Ella, Bill, and Sina. And thank you very much. And